Hi, and welcome back to Unmasking the Trans Movement with John Euler. I'm your host, Brad Wilder. Today on the show, Robin Atkins is back along with John Euler to discuss, well, how this process is really affecting your kids and how this is really affecting you as parents and grandparents as well along the way. We've got a lot to get to and break down in today's show. Stay right there. We'll be right back.
Join Unmasking the Trans Movement with John Euler, Sunday, April 23rd at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, as he hosts Unmasking the Trans Movement's next webinar, where we connect you with the clinical professionals who provide understanding on the many topics that make up this disturbing ideology and answer any questions you may have. Protecting the most vulnerable, women and children, Unmasking the Trans Movement. For more info on guests, dates, times, and pricing, see us online at unmaskingthetransmovement.com.
Welcome back. Today, John Euler and Robin Atkins are about to sit down. John is all standing by and ready to go. John, let's bring you into the program right now. I know that Robin is a regular guest. She's already done a couple of episodes with us. They've been compelling, as most of our episodes are here on the show. Today, where and how predators are targeting our kids. Again, part 3. Robin left off last time somewhere with her sneaking a boy into her room at the age of 15. And I'll let you kind of take it from there, John.
And that's exactly right, Brad. And that had a lasting impact upon Robin. Robin, thank you for being back with us. We have subject matter experts on our program, and you are more than just a subject matter expert. You are also a professional therapist, which is additionally helpful because you are not only a survivor, but you are a therapist as well. So you bring both perspectives, and that is really unusual, and so we're so grateful. So pick it up where we left off. You were just describing some of those key moments in your life that really changed the trajectory of things. And this is so important for people to know, so that not only do they have empathy for survivors, but so that they can know how best to respond, because you experienced a response that sent things in a very different direction that may not have needed to if you had had some people that were supportive.
Yeah, that's correct. Thank you so much for having me back. I appreciate it. I just kind of want to remind everyone and bring them back to where we're at, that the sexual molestation I experienced as a young child under the age of 5 had kind of primed me to be mentally attuned to unsafe people. I didn't know that. I didn't have that language, of course, at that time, but I was attuned to unsafe people as the norm. So when I was 15, seeking approval from males, I invited a 17-year-old from my school to my parents' house when they weren't there, and he raped me. And after that, I hid it from everyone, but I found a way to a local clinic, like a local health clinic, to do some testing. And then I went to my church to see what I needed to do for healing. And at this point, my parents still did not know what had happened to me.
And what grade? You're a sophomore in high school?
I was a freshman.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah. So I was in the waiting room of my pastor's office at the time, and he was in his office, and I didn't know who he was with, but I heard him screaming and yelling. And I heard him say, you're not welcome here anymore, get out. And out of his office walks a 16-year-old young woman, obviously pregnant. And at that time, I didn't know if I was pregnant or not. I didn't know if he would believe me that I had been raped, but I certainly didn't feel safe enough to tell him what had happened to me. If he was willing to kick a young woman in distress out who's pregnant, what is he going to do to me? So I basically just turned up, walked out, and that's when I walked away from church altogether. I started drinking alcohol. I started hanging out with very dangerous people. I completely didn't care anymore, really, about what happened to me or who I was with. I was on a very destructive path. And that continued for quite a while. My parents, about 4 months later, found out what had happened. And my father's response, I think I talked about this a little bit in the last episode. My father's response was very hurtful to me, although I now as an adult understand why he responded that way. So that shut me down again as well. He basically said, if you weren't such a whore, that wouldn't have happened to you. And like I said in the last episode, I understand he was feeling very out of control and upset that I broke his rules that were trying to keep me safe. And he was wounded by that.
But
and he also
suffice,
said, go ahead.
suffice it to say that probably not the best response that a parent can give a young teenager. Right? To call a young teenager a whore is probably not going to be beneficial.
No, not at all. I think to help others understand the appropriate response to any teenager, whether they've been raped or they've chosen to have sex, I don't believe any child can consent. But if they are saying they consented to it, is to figure out why, who they've done this with, are those person's parents aware, and I would caution parents against putting a hard block on seeing that person, because that's going to send the child running to that person even more. But everything has to be within boundaries then. So if I have two teenagers, if one of them came to me and said, I'm sexually active, we would be having lots of conversations, and they would not have time alone with that person. They would still be able to see them, because I don't want them sneaking around trying to see them, but they would not be able to be alone with them.
And as a matter of fact, maybe we are supposed to address this, that if being sexually active is different than, though that's how teens become pregnant. But if a young girl approaches her parents, I think it's important for parents to realize that, listen, this kid, the amount of strength it took for this kid to disclose, because in this day and age, this kid has a lot of alternatives. So the fact that she's coming to her parents, she's needing support. So at that moment, every parent needs to think through ahead of time what's their response going to be. But if we can maintain ourselves and be comforting, because this kid has an intuitive sense. If she has chosen to expose the fact that she's pregnant, then she is taking a very brave step, and she's going through it. This young daughter of ours.
This is a perfect parallel to how parents should respond if a child comes to them and says, I'm gay or I'm trans or whatever. We aren't anymore in the age where I was growing up, where there wasn't a counterculture waiting for parents to respond in anger, and the child goes fleeing and they're with open arms. We're going to affirm you and take you down a path of destruction. When I was growing up, that culture didn't exist, but now it does. So parents need to be very cautious about, if you respond in anger to your child, there's a whole community out there waiting to wrap them up in deviancy or wrap them up in transitioning. And so replying with care, concern, and if parent has overwhelming emotion, it's okay to say, I so appreciate you telling me. I do need a few minutes to collect myself, that I'm having my own emotional response, and I want to manage that before we chat. Is it okay if we come back in 10 minutes and talk about this? That's perfectly fine. You're allowed to have emotions as a parent. And you're allowed to speak your emotions. I'm angry that you've chosen to engage in that, but I love you more than I'm angry. So let's talk about why you did that. Let's talk about why you feel like you're trans. Let's talk about what healthy boundaries are around this. Personally, I would advise any parent, if your child comes to you saying they're trans, pull them from their school immediately. If they're in public or private school. Unfortunately, in my areas, I'm in a very, very conservative state. And even in my areas, even the religious schools, it's there. So pull them from school. And if they need help knowing how to homeschool, contact me. I'm more than happy to help them with that. You can't, at that point, if your child says they think they're trans, you cannot leave them in the environment anymore. That's every day affirming them in that. It's like handing your child to the enemy every day.
So, Robin, let me just jump in here. Are schools actually still safe?
No, I don't think so. I think there's individual teachers that are safe people, but I don't think schools are safe places anymore at all. And that's why I don't send my kids there. My kids were in public school until 2020. So it's relatively recent. that we're homeschooling. And I work full time. I run a business. My husband works full time. It's not convenient for us to homeschool, but my children's well-being is so much more important than what's convenient to me. And so my kids are never going back. There's no way, and my youngest is 6. There's no way in her lifetime between 6 and 18, I think I will trust the schools again. It's not going to happen. We're too far down the path of schools are now indoctrination. So we're not doing that. But to bring it back around to what happened to me and the response I got from both the church and my dad, that's what we're talking about here, is when you respond to a child in anger or frustration or hurt, like I did, that child goes running. So I went running to alcohol and dangerous people. I turned everything around my senior year of high school and kind of got back on track. But at that point, I was already so emotionally broken that I was basically a ticking time bomb. So I went to Hillsdale College for my freshman year. And I don't know if people are aware of Hillsdale College, but it's a very, very conservative college that does not take any federal funding at all. So they're able to bring a lot of things into their university or their college that other colleges are not allowed to. So it was a very unique experience, but even at that tiny college, there was lots of drugs, lots of sex, lots of alcohol. And I was partaking in all of that, really hating myself. And I don't think that the survivor experience is that different than the children that are experiencing gender dysphoria from that point of view. They're very different in many ways, but that self-loathing that a survivor can feel is the same self-loathing that someone with gender dysphoria can feel. And so you're both in that same place of risk about, I'm seeking a way out of my body. I hated my body. It was my enemy. It was what's used as a weapon against me. So when I was, I ended up in a major car accident the summer after my freshman year of college and had to drop out. I had a major head injury, and it took a couple years to recover from that. And during that time, I got married to a man I had no business being involved with. He was 8 years older. I was his third wife. Our relationship was extremely toxic. He was involved in viewing child pornography, which when I found that out, that's when we split ways permanently. But during that time, he involved me in pornography. So I was recording pornography with him. My only solace in that now still is that the only person I was engaged with I was at least married to in pornography. But it's really hard to talk about that period because the things people requested I do on film, not the producers, but they would have people like, I had a website and people would send requests, were so depraved and so demeaning. My body was so objectified, each part of it was something that they wanted to utilize for their pleasure in a demeaning, harmful, violent way. And they piecemealed me apart, like the trans movement piecemeals children apart. And it became about my body parts rather than my whole person and my identity as a child of God and my personality. I was just piecemealed apart, like trans people are, or kids with gender dysphoria are. And so I ended up in another relationship and thought I had contracted an STD. And I was too afraid to tell anyone. At that point, I was homeless, living in my car, addicted to multiple substances. And so I turned to Planned Parenthood. In the back of my head was always, man, if the church is going to turn someone who's pregnant away, they're definitely not going to help me with this. I'm homeless, addicted, living in my car with a guy who's a mess. And I'm not turning to my parents. I see how that goes. So I turned to Planned Parenthood. And while I was there, they did cure my STD, but they also sold me an abortion. And I was 21. And that, I didn't know it at the time, but it destroyed me. I lost all respect for myself and any hope for my future at that point. So I managed to make it through. I got divorced. I ended that relationship with that other man. I managed to make it through undergrad. I got a degree in philosophy and a degree in psychology. And my brother actually saved me from the path I was on. He asked me to help out with his kids. He was in Iraq in Desert Storm, and his wife was back here in the States with their kids, and he said, I need you to go help with the kids. And so I picked up and moved several states away, which was the best thing that could happen for me. I was separated from all the bad influences that I was surrounded by, and I had to start over. And so I took about a year. I got clean, and I met my now husband. We've been married 17 years now. And our first meeting, I told him everything. I said, I can't waste time anymore with this game of like, are we going to deal with each other's history? I just need you. And I laid everything out that I've told you, all the things that happened. And his response to me was, well, I don't have to worry about you lying about me. So that's a plus in my column. And, you know, here we are 17 years later. But he was a upstanding young gentleman that had never really experienced a lot of trauma. He was a virgin when we got married, and all the trauma I had has had an impact on our marriage over the years. We've had to work really hard to overcome the abuse that happened to me, because I have flashbacks sometimes about the rape. And all of the partners I was involved with in the years that I was trying to destroy myself can interrupt our relationship. So those are really ongoing things that we have to work through. And parallel to that, when you look at children who transition and now are sterile or can't experience orgasm, it's impacting their relationships for the rest of their life. So we have all these parallels. We have these parallels of groomers to the trans movement and groomers to sexual abuse. And then they parallel all the way through to the trauma that happens for the rest of your life when you are piecemealed as body parts rather than a whole healthy human being. And so it wasn't until we had our first child together, I was 30, when she was born, I just fell apart into pieces. And he was very concerned, obviously, and he's like, what's going on? Why are you falling apart? And I said, well, you know, it just really hit home what I lost in that abortion. It was my child that I lost in that abortion, and I don't feel worthy to parent. I'm scared. What if I hurt my child? I ended up in postpartum depression. What if I hurt my child? And it took several years of counseling and a retreat to get through that, to end up where I'm at now in reproductive mental health. And so I think the overall lesson of all of this to me was, when you have somebody who's intending to use another person's body in a deviant way or for their own purposes or for an ideological movement, you end up removing their unique humanity and replacing it with a path to destruction. And that's what we're seeing happen with our kids.
And I couldn't agree more. You know, it's, as you're talking, and we've had a little bit of sound difficulty. I don't know if people have been able to detect that. We've never had that before. So, but you are 100% correct. And not that I need to tell you that, but that really is part of our message. Unmasking the Trans Movement is here to try to help people understand from a very macro to, meaning a large view, to connect dots of what I call the unholy or the dark special interests that are, as it were, feeding off the carcasses of our kids. That sounds graphic, but still objectifying these kids, down to the micro. And unless people see how all these dots connect, they'll miss it. They'll be focusing on, flags or pronouns, and they won't see that there's a lot of different things that converge. And what you have just described is a passion of mine to help people understand, which is there are predators, financial and sexual predators, that are waiting for the opportunity to gain access to the private spaces and private parts of kids. And our minds don't want to believe that. And that's really the thing that I didn't want to believe it. No, right? Because it shatters our view of life being safe and tranquil. And yes, it does. It really does.
It really does. You know, somebody asked me recently, what's one of the things you're most proud of as a parent? And my immediate response was, My oldest child is 15 and she's never been assaulted. As if I have 100% control of that. Of course I don't. But just the fact that she was spared all of the destruction that happens when, like you said, predators, whether it's financial or sexual, seek to use our children for their own means. And you had asked me a really important question. I think it was in the first episode of this series about what turned it all around for me, or what set me on the path of healing. And this is such a beautiful story. I was in Tennessee still, where I lived with my ex-husband right after undergrad. And I was working at an insurance company selling insurance by phone. Terrible job. But the woman next to me was praying the Lord's Prayer every morning. And I looked at her one day and I said, I really don't think God cares how much insurance we sell today. So I don't understand why you're doing this. And she said, just come have lunch with me. And I was like, fine, whatever. I warned her, like, all of that is lost on me. I don't trust the church. I don't trust religion, but fine, I'll have lunch with you. It was the first time anyone had ever introduced me to Jesus Christ, really to him. The church I grew up in was so based on sin and you're unredeemable. I had never met the grace of Christ before. And when she explained it to me, she could tell it was just completely foreign to me and I had no idea. And she said, I just want you to watch The Passion and let me know how it goes. So that weekend I rented The Passion and about halfway through fell to my knees, gave my heart to God. And right around that time, that's when my brother called as well and just said, I have to leave this life for whatever he calls me to. And the big thing isn't, and I know there's lots of skepticism, there's atheists that don't believe. That's fine. You don't have to believe what I believe, but I can only tell you what that did for me. It took my identity from this person that's used for other people's pleasure to something eternal. My identity is based on what Jesus did, not on who I am or what's been done to me or what I've even done. And so no one can take that identity from me. It's constant and it never changes. It doesn't matter what fads are going on. It doesn't matter what I look like, how much weight I gain, whether or not I wear makeup. It doesn't matter who's sexually attracted to me or who I'm attracted to. None of that matters. It's eternal, based outside of me on something that's stable. And these kids are being robbed of an identity and a security outside other people's affirmation. I can't think of anything more dangerous than your worth depends on other people's affirmation.
Robin, it's interesting that you bring up your personal journey. How you awakened to faith, especially after having had such a negative experience. I think that speaks to a lot of people that are going to be listening to us, that they were burned by the church in whatever that means to them, right? They had an early experience and that was it. But it's interesting. So somebody might say, why are you bringing that up? Well, I want to challenge people to think through what's happening to our kids, because what I have seen more and more, and it's really therefore, I think, just manifesting itself, is when you look at the symbolism within the trans movement, you will see more and more now the pentagram. The pentagram is the number one symbol used in Satanism. I have a picture, I brought that up in previous shows, that this young trans person posted online, picture of a trans flag, and superimposed upon that is a pentagram, and he received that flag as sort of a commonality with this young trans person who had helped volunteer. And so this young person was so excited to show, and he has it as a banner in his room. So there's the trans flag superimposed with a pentagram, and he says, thank you to the Church of Satan. I'm so excited. And then he has hashtag Hail Satan. So it is, people need to understand, this is more than just an intellectual thing. Now, does every kid that gets into this, do they have a spiritual component? No, they have a void though, but they have deep hurts. But I want people to understand that there is a spiritual component, and that's why there's a lack of reasoning when these young people start to get into this and they become reactive. It's very close.
Well, maybe in our next episode, we should talk about why it is a spiritual battle, because the trans movement is a religion. And I think we should probably talk about that. How
And
the
when we say it's an
progressive,
ideology, right? Ideology is a belief system. And if you believe something deeply enough and are committed to it, right, you can have there's a religious component to that.
the parallels to Christianity, but with hedonism being the goal rather than salvation, it's uncanny.
Once you
So,
bring
yeah,
hedonism into it, it turns into the word cult, doesn't it?
yes, it is absolutely a cult. And it's interesting to me that the progressives think that progressing to hedonism is something new. It's a tale as old as time. I mean, it's been happening since the dawn of humankind. That's not progressive. That's just deviancy. But they seem to think this is a wonderful new thing. I don't know.
Well, Robin, I'm aware of the time constraints. So would you be willing to stay right there? We will continue on the other side of this, other part, because there is also so much that I would like to ask you about just briefly. And then if you'll come back in subsequent episodes, we can go in deeply about it. Your experience, you've had about as many experiences as somebody could have, including the fact that, as you said, that you were homeless, living out of your car, and then you felt abandoned, you fell into the wrong crowd, or as you said, you were self-destructive. There is so much there, and that's why I believe you are speaking to a lot of people, a lot of young people right now. So thank you, Brad.
Thank you so much for having me.
And you stay right there. We're going to continue. Brad, this is another vital episode that we're doing.
Absolutely it is. Thank you, both of you. Part 2 is coming up. This is Unmasking the Trans Movement. Please remember you can find us online at our BitChute channel under Unmasking the Trans Movement. As well, you can check out our website at unmaskingthetransmovement.com. On behalf of John Euler and Robin Atkins and myself, Brad Wilder, remember, it's not our kids' fight, it's our fight.